Amid the blinding snowstorm of Cedar Hollow, the wind pounded against the mountainside like urgent drumbeats. Aiden Cole tightened his harness and glanced at Rocco, the German shepherd whose bright eyes and proud stance were ready to face the heart of danger. They trudged through snow that rose to their knees, each breath turning into a cloud of white mist. Suddenly, through the swirling white, a small figure emerged. A child's shivering hair dusted with snow, wide eyes filled with both fear and hope. And the moment Rocco stepped closer would touch the heart of anyone who witnessed it. The sky over Cedar Hollow lay heavy in a dense shade of gray, thick clouds, drifting low against the mountain peaks as if a single touch could shatter them into a cascade of snow. The wind howled in sharp, restless bursts, threading through the towering pines and sweeping clouds of fine snow that stung the skin like tiny shards of ice. The blanket of snow on the ground had already risen to knee height, each step leaving a deep imprint that the wind quickly blurred. Visibility shrank to only a few dozen meters. Everything beyond dissolved into the blinding white, as if the world itself had vanished. This blizzard was not only fierce, it had lingered for days, sealing every road into the town. For the people of Cedar Hollow, winter storms were a familiar test, yet few came with the merciless edge of this year's fury. Beneath that dim sky, a row of bright red rescue trucks stood outside the station, their compartments open, releasing warm plumes of heating system steam that billowed into the cold like the breath of some great beast bracing against the chill. Inside the garage, Aiden Cole was checking his harness and rescue hooks. He was no stranger to urgency. Over a decade ago, he had been a firefighter in the city. But after a life-changing incident pushed him away from the noise, Aiden had found Cedar Hollow, a quiet mountain town, and started anew. Here he joined the volunteer rescue team, a role that gave him both purpose and the peace of living, close to the nature he loved. Beside him stood Rocco, a 3-year-old German shepherd with striking black and tan fur and sharp, steady eyes. Rocco was more than a companion. He was Aiden's partner in every mission, trained to locate missing people in the harshest conditions, whether deep forests or frozen slopes. Guided by an unerring nose and quick instinctive responses. Amid the clatter of gear and the roar of the wind outside, Rocco stood still, ears swiveling toward every sound, nose twitching subtly as if already sifting the air for a trace. Maya, the team's communications coordinator, strode in, holding a radio. Her voice was urgent, yet clear. "We've got a report of a group of hikers stranded near the northern forest edge. Possible children in the group. They've been out of contact for over 4 hours." The air in the garage tightened. Aiden glanced at Rocco, and the dog's eyes seemed to flash with understanding at the word children. Aiden zipped up his storm jacket, pulled a wool hat over his ears, and slipped on his gloves. Every motion was swift, yet deliberate, the product of countless departures into dangerous weather. Large backpacks were laid out on the table. Inside, high-powered flashlights, first aid kits, climbing ropes, GPS trackers, and packs of high-energy food. Aiden inspected each piece, fingers trailing along the braided rope to feel its strength. In the corner, Rocco was fitted with a special protective vest, equipped with a camera and GPS, so the team could track him when he moved ahead. Outside, the wind slammed against the steel doors, rattling them with each gust. Snow piled higher over the truck hoods with every passing minute. When the clock signaled departure, the team stepped out together. No one wasted words. Everyone knew each minute could draw the line between life and death. Aiden climbed into the truck, and Rocco leapt effortlessly into the back seat, circling once before sitting upright, gaze fixed on the window, as if waiting for the signal to move. His warm breath fogged into thin clouds that faded into the frigid air. The engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting a golden path through the thick snow. Inside the cab, Aiden rested his hand on Rocco's head, feeling the warmth through the dog's dense coat. It was more than a gesture. It was a silent pact that they were about to step into a fight nature would give no mercy in. In the distance, the mountain loomed like a wall across the horizon, shrouded in milky fog. The road into the northern forest was nearly erased beneath the fresh snow. Every step from here would be a battle against wind, cold, and time. The radio crackled to life, Maya's voice coming through from the command post. "You're the closest unit to the missing group's last known location. Be careful. The storm's worsening above 200 meters. Aiden answered briefly, eyes locked ahead. In the back seat, Rocco tilted his head, his dark brown eyes lit with focus beneath the dim cabin light, ears, sharp body poised. Cedar Hollow's blizzard was at its fiercest, but inside the truck, the air was thick with determination. As the wheels bit into the deep snow, their story began. One that neither Aiden nor Rocco could yet imagine in full, a journey into dangers that would carve themselves into memory. The radio continued to hiss with intermittent static, the wind outside screaming through the trees. The rescue truck crawled north, tires crunching over the snow in a slow, steady rhythm that felt like the heartbeat of time itself. Every ear inside was tuned to the voice from command, knowing each scrap of information could be as vital as a candle's light in endless darkness. Maya's voice returned, cutting through the interference. "We've picked up a broken call from a phone near the northern forest edge. Very faint. Sounds like children. Unclear how many." Then the signal died completely. No one needed further explanation. Children in a snowstorm had only a small window before the cold claimed them. Aiden's eyes flicked toward Rocco. The shepherd sat steady, muscles taut beneath his reflective orange vest, ears standing high, his locked ahead, as if he had already accepted the mission the moment he'd heard the word children. The rescue team halted at a safe point to recheck their plan. They spread a topographic map across the hood of the truck, red marks pinpointing possible routes. Aiden traced his finger along a narrow trail skirting the mountainside. A path locals often used to reach the forest edge, but one that winter snow could easily swallow whole. He suggested splitting into 2 units, one to follow the main route, while he and Rocco would take the narrow trail to increase the chances of a quick approach. Preparation moved like a finely tuned machine. Climbing ropes were coiled neatly, carabiners clipped at the hip for quick access. Waterproof flashlights, GPS devices, and radios had their batteries checked and were sealed in moisture-proof covers. Each member carried a personal first aid kit, several packets of high-energy food, and an insulated water bottle. Aiden crouched to check Rocco's harness one last time. He tugged lightly at each buckle, smoothed his palm over the reflective strips to ensure no ice could snag them. On the chest plate of Rocco's protective vest, a small camera sat firmly in place, transmitting live footage to the command center. Aiden pressed a hand to the shepherd's strong shoulder, tilting his head slightly, his voice low but warm. "You're ready, old friend." Rocco nudged his head into Aiden's palm in answer. In that moment, they seemed to share a single heartbeat. Not just man and dog, but teammates whose trust in each other was absolute, standing against a world of snow and wind. Once everything was set, Aiden's team stepped out the wind, striking hard against their faces. Snow swirled up from the ground, wrapping around their legs, clinging to every fold of their gear. They moved in a tight line, Aiden leading with Rocco in front, 2 teammates following with additional equipment. Their movement followed strict protocol, deliberate measured steps to avoid thin ice hidden under snow. A pause every 10 minutes to check position and stamina. Silent communication through hand signals and flashlight beams when the wind smothered voices. Rocco stayed at the front, head low, ears swiveling to catch every sound. The narrow trail was almost completely buried, marked only by jutting rocks or leaning tree trunks. Aiden kept a close eye on the terrain while watching Rocco's responses. Each time the dog caught a scent, he would stop, glance back, then veer in a new direction. Strong gusts swept through, whipping up veils of snow that hid the world for seconds at a time. Yet within that white blur, Aiden could always pick out Rocco's shape. Black and tan fur standing out sharply, moving with a grace that the storm could not slow. In those moments, Aiden was reminded why he trusted the dog beyond question. Rocco worked not just from instinct, but from a quiet, steadfast devotion. The slope steepened their breath, fogging into thick white clouds. The GPS signal weakened, proof they were pressing into a wind-shielded part of the mountainside. Maya's voice crackled over the radio. Winds shifting up high. Snowfall will get heavier. You've got 15 minutes to clear that slope before visibility drops by half. Copy, Aiden replied, then signaled Rocco forward. The dog cut into a narrower path where pine trees blocked some of the wind. The snow here was deep but stable, allowing faster progress. In Aiden's mind, the faint voice from that broken call replayed. A child's tone carrying an urgency no weather could drown. Somewhere ahead, small lives were waiting. Just before leaving the trail for the forest edge, Aiden paused, placing a hand on Rocco's shoulder. The warmth through his glove carried a quiet strength into his chest. Harder obstacles lay ahead, but their bond was already set for the most unforgiving part of the mission. Outside, the blizzard screamed on, but in Rocco's deep brown eyes, Aiden saw the light of direction. As they entered the thicker trees, the warmth from his partner beside him felt like a silent promise they would find what they were looking for. Suddenly, the wind shifted violently, whipping snow into a blinding haze. Fresh flakes clung in thin layers to their coats and hoods. Aiden leaned forward against the force, his gaze fixed on Rocco's form ahead, until the shepherd froze head low, drawing deep breaths of the rushing air. Aiden knew instantly. Rocco had found something. Under normal conditions, scent drifted in steady currents, but in a blizzard it shattered into fragments, scattering in every direction. Only a highly trained K9 could piece those fragments together into a trail. Rocco slowed each step, deliberate head tilting slightly from side to side as if measuring, when a gust carried a trace of something unusual. His ears shot up, nose quivered, tail lifted. Pure concentration in motion. Snow clinging to his neck, fur trembled with each breath, forming tiny ice crystals that caught the dim light. Aiden moved closer, kneeling beside him. The dog's eyes were locked toward a dense patch of forest to the right, a place blasted by crosswinds, its trees heavy with snow. Hardly a place a person could move through. But Aiden knew Rocco wouldn't stop for the scent of wildlife. His training could distinguish the smell of human fear and strain. Find them. Rocco. Aiden said, his voice low but steady, a command woven from years of shared work. Rocco dropped his body lower to cut the wind's drag and pushed into the deep snow. Each step left a sharp imprint, his tail giving a subtle sway, the silent signal that he was still on the trail. The team paused briefly to assess the situation. The wind was cutting their visibility, forcing them to keep a tight formation. But when Rocco pressed deeper into the trees, Aiden signaled for the two members behind to split. Split directions. Rocco and I will follow this scent. You two sweep the old trail. Check in every 5 minutes. The order was carried out at once. Footsteps sank into the snow, separating in 2 different arcs, leaving Aiden and Rocco pushing straight into the denser forest. Here the snow was partially shielded by towering pines, creating pockets of shadow streaked with silvery light. The air was colder, yet quieter too, allowing the sound of Aiden and Rocco's breathing to stand out in the vast stillness. Rocco halted again, glancing back at Aiden as if to confirm the path, then moved forward. His ears stood high, swiveling at times toward faint noises behind, while his nose drew in long, steady breaths, as though reading a story carried by the wind. Aiden knew that a K9's scent work was a delicate fusion of memory and analysis. Rocco could recall smells from past encounters, compare them with the fresh scent on the breeze, and strip away distractions. Pine resin, damp earth, frozen moss. It was why even in the storm's chaos, Rocco moved with the certainty of someone walking an invisible road only he could see. They crested a short slope, the snow softer and deeper here, each of Aiden's steps dragging like a weight of stone. But whenever Rocco picked up his pace, Aiden found his own strength renewed. Suddenly, the shepherd stopped pawing lightly at the snow as if signaling. Aiden stepped closer to find a shallow depression, likely a footprint, half buried under fresh powder. He brushed his gloved fingers over it, feeling the compressed difference between old and new snow. It was the first true sign that they were near someone. Tension and hope rose together in his chest. He keyed the radio. Aiden's team reporting possible human track. Continuing pursuit. Rocco, given the signal to proceed, surged forward in a controlled run. Snow burst away from each step, leaving a bright trail in their wake. Aiden stayed close, eyes locked on the dog's powerful frame. The wind still lashed sideways, but the pair had fallen into the rhythm of the storm. In Aiden's mind, hope began to burn brighter. First signs often meant they were closing in. Then Rocco stopped again, head turned toward a new gust carrying a stronger scent. Aiden knew instantly the search had entered a new phase, one where things might become clearer, yet also far more dangerous. Snow thickened, swirling in fierce spirals. Daylight drained rapidly, the sky settling into a deep gray that pressed urgency into every step. Aiden gripped his pack straps tighter, eyes on Rocco. His steady pace, erect ears sweeping the unseen nose, pulling in the cold air like a compass. Rocco suddenly lowered his head, inhaling deeply, just above the snow. Aiden stepped forward, looking down to see a scattering of small, uneven depressions. A thin crust of snow lay over them, proving they weren't fresh but hadn't yet been erased. He knelt, feeling the compacted center through his glove. They were the size and depth of a child's footprints. A chill ran down his spine, not from the wind, but from the thought if children had passed this way in such conditions, their safety window was closing fast. He looked at Rocco, sharing the unspoken urgency. The shepherd's brown eyes met his with unwavering focus, and in the next instant, Rocco veered toward a cluster of fresher tracks, increasing his speed. Aiden kept pace, each step plunging to his ankles, breath pouring out in thick white clouds. The wind tore through the treetops, creating a low, distant roar, blending with the crunch of snow under their boots and the steady pulse of Rocco's breathing. They moved like one, bound by the single purpose of finding whoever had left those prints before the mountain swallowed them in darkness. Minute by minute, the pale daylight faded into the cold palette of a storm-bound dusk. Visibility, already poor, shrank even further beneath the sweeping white curtain of wind-driven snow. Aiden glanced at his watch. They hadn't yet reached the scheduled check-in. He balanced urgency with caution, but the press of time beat faster in his chest. Ahead, Rocco froze mid-stride, his body taut as a drawn bowstring. Aiden stopped, instantly scanning the shadows. The wind shifted, carrying a scent more concentrated now. Rocco turned his eyes, speaking the words, "close." They pressed on the tracks, clearer now, where wind had scoured away the surface. A few dragged marks in the snow suggested someone moving with exhaustion, maybe stumbling and rising again. Each sign struck Aiden as a warning that the clock was running out. Then, through the swirling snow, a small flicker of movement between two pine trunks. Aiden narrowed his eyes, his heart seizing. In the sea of white, a pair of wide, dark eyes stared back, filled with fear and fatigue. They caught the dim light of dusk, glinting like two tiny flames in the frozen air. He raised a hand to slow Rocco, lowering his stance to avoid frightening the figure. Step by step, he drew closer, the eyes never leaving his. As the shape came into focus, the truth tightened around him. It was a little girl, thinly dressed, arms wrapped tight around herself for warmth. Snow clung to her hair and shoulders, her lips pale, yet in her gaze, a fragile thread of hope still flickered. In that moment, Aiden felt a strange blend of tension and relief. Tension because the child was clearly at the edge of her endurance, relief because, at last, they had found a life clinging to survival in the heart of the storm. He knelt, his voice low and steady. "You're safe now. I'm Aiden, and this is Rocco. We're going to take you home." Rocco stood close, his gaze softening, head tilted as if to reassure her. His tail gave a slow sweep, though his body remained taut, ready to react if danger stirred nearby. The light was fading fast, and the wind had risen another notch. Aiden knew every action from here had to be swift and precise. He pulled a thermal rescue blanket from his pack, wrapping it around the girl's narrow shoulders, then met Rocco's eyes. An unspoken agreement passing between them. They needed to leave now, before the storm made the way back impossible. As Aiden lifted her, her gaze never left Rocco, as though she had found an anchor in the cold, boundless world. They began moving, new footprints pressed deep into the snow, leading into the swirling white, toward an uncertain horizon, yet with every step closer to whatever waited ahead. From the mountains above, wind poured down like invisible waves of ice, rattling the old pines until their branches hissed and shook. Snow fell in steady layers, one atop another, until the ground was a boundless white carpet. Rocco moved quickly, in front ears erect, nose sampling every current of frozen air for any hint of life. Suddenly he froze. His body went rigid, eyes fixed on a point at the forest's edge, where snow-coated trunks formed a dim wall. Aiden caught the change instantly. The canine's instinct had flagged something unusual. He stopped, tightening his grip on the lead, the other hand adjusting his pack for quick movement. Through the storm's haze, a small shape emerged, huddled at the base of a pine. The child's thin jacket all but vanished into the snow, save for the dark strands of hair whipping in the wind. Rocco edged forward slower now, head tilted, tail lowered. A signal of calm approach, meant not to startle. Aiden closed the distance slowly, lowering himself so his eyes met the child's. When only a few paces remained, the girl's face came into focus. Cheeks pale with cold, lips trembling, wide eyes shimmering with tears. She looked at Aiden, then at Rocco, as if searching for the words she could manage. Her voice came so faint it was almost stolen by the wind. But Aiden caught every word. "My mom. She's gone. Please save. My little brothers and sisters." Time seemed to stop. A sharper cold swept into Aiden's chest, not from the storm, but from the weight of those words. For a brief second he caught Rocco's gaze, deep, unwavering, as though the dog too was accepting that plea. Swallowing hard, Aiden stepped closer. He wrapped the reflective rescue blanket around her, the trapped warmth slowly seeping into her shivering body. He knew every passing minute could take away the chance to save the other children. Rocco sat beside her now, head slightly lowered, eyes locked on her face. He gently touched his nose to her hand, a silent reassurance. Strangely, the touch seemed to steady her breathing. The wild panic in her eyes eased, and she let out a small sob before burying her face into the blanket. Aiden spoke clearly, his voice deep but warm enough to cut through the wind. "Lena, I'm going to get you somewhere safe, and we'll find your brothers and sisters. I promise." The answer came not in words, but in a faint nod and a glimmer of trust in her eyes. That was all Aiden needed. He keyed the radio. "This is Aiden. We have a young girl. Name's Lena. Mother deceased. Siblings still missing. Request immediate support. Multiple children likely nearby." Maya's voice snapped back through the static. "Copy. Back up en route. Maintain constant contact." Aiden signaled Rocco with a small hand motion only they shared. The shepherd immediately shifted back into search mode, circling to pick up any trace of the other children. Darkness was coming fast. The last silver light along the horizon was swallowed by thick cloud, replaced by a cold, heavy blue. Aiden knew they had to act before night, and snow made the search nearly impossible. He lifted Lena again, her body light, as brittle wood chilled to the core. Each of his steps bit deep into the snow, Rocco scouting ahead, pausing now and then to test the wind. Each pause drew Aiden's focus, hoping for another sign. A shadow, a sound, anything. Though the blizzard roared around them, Aiden's mind had narrowed to a single point of focus. Lena's words about her siblings were etched into him like an unshakable order. He would not leave these woods without them. Through the white silence, the figures of Aiden, Lena, and Rocco pressed forward, leaving a fresh trail of prints into the storm. A path toward a mission that had only just begun. The silver rescue blanket shimmered faintly in the dim light, wrapped snug around Lena's small frame. Her trembling breaths began to steady, sheltered by the warmth and Aiden's steady hold. He leaned down, securing the blanket's edges so the wind could not slip inside, then eased her against the base of a pine that offered a momentary shield. "Lena, keep the blanket tight and speak into this radio if anyone calls, all right?" He clipped the handheld unit to her chest, the frequency already set. She nodded faintly, her eyes tracking his every move as though afraid he and Rocco might vanish into the white at any second. Aiden keyed his radio, his voice clipped and steady. "This is Aiden. Lena is secure at a temporary safe point. Beginning search for other children. Rocco will lead. Keep our location under constant watch." The speaker crackled with static before Maya's voice cut through. "Copy. Check in every 7 minutes. Watch the northern slope. Unstable terrain, possible slides." Lowering the radio, Aiden met Rocco's eyes. The shepherd straightened instantly, nose lifting to the wind, ears angling and shifting to listen to its currents. No further words were needed. Rocco began moving with deliberate, confident steps, guiding Aiden deeper into the forest. From the first strides, Aiden could feel the terrain's hostility. The narrow path was buried, all landmarks erased under snow. Beneath the powder-slick tree roots waited to catch a careless foot, and on either side stood old pines heavy with snow, their branches shedding frozen sheets whenever the wind tore through. The wind moaned through the ravine long and low like some distant hollow call, punctuated by the occasional sharp crack of a limb breaking loose. Aiden's eyes swept the snow's surface, reading its faint ripples and scours, a skill honed during years as a firefighter and rescue volunteer. Here, even the smallest change in texture could mean a hidden path or a drop concealed under the drifts. Rocco suddenly veered left into a steep, narrow incline. Aiden followed close, his steps careful but urgent, his heartbeat pushing him onward. The slope was littered with jagged stones, nearly hidden beneath the snow. Each time Rocco leapt over a mound, Aiden had to drive forward with full strength, boots sinking deep, calves aching from the cold. The deeper they went, the more the darkness gathered. Light from Aiden's helmet lamp carved thin golden beams through the shadows, reaching only a few meters ahead. Every sweep of the beam revealed twisted branches, uneven ground, and occasional rock hollows where the wind whistled in an eerie, flute-like note. Rocco paused briefly, inhaling sharply from the wind ahead, before quickening his pace. The shift told Aiden the scent was clearer now. But it also meant they were moving into the most dangerous stretch, where crosswinds tore at the snowpack and avalanches were possible. At a sharp bend, wind slammed into them from the side, peppering their faces with ice shards fine as needles. Aiden braced against a tree, tightening Rocco's lead with his other hand. Above, a faint crack made him glance up. Snow was about to drop from a branch. He yanked Rocco back just as a heavy slab crashed onto the spot they had been exploding into a haze of white. His pulse jumped, but he refused to slow. Time was the weight on his shoulders now. Every minute meant the children's warmth fading further. He drew in a lungful of icy air, eyes never leaving Rocco's shape, cutting forward through the blur. Through the gauzy haze of wind-blown snow, a faint opening appeared ahead. A place where the wind shifted and the scent Rocco hunted grew stronger. Aiden knew this was only the beginning. Beyond lay not just the hazards of a storm-bound mountain, but the real trial for both their strength and resolve. The wind from the slope sharpened, slicing at their skin like invisible blades. Each gust carried thousands of tiny snow crystals, stinging Aiden's face and dimming the already narrow visibility. Beneath their feet, fresh snowfall had been steadily erasing what little evidence remained, turning the forest into a blank, shifting maze. Yet Rocco pressed forward, nose nearly grazing the snow. He breathed deep, sampling, carefully spiraling outward in small arcs to gather what threads of scent still clung to the frozen air. Aiden knew the storm had nearly scoured everything clean. This would have been the point where most searches ended. But for Rocco, even the faintest trace was a lifeline. Aiden stayed close, watching every move. When Rocco halted to lift his head, pulling in a sharper breath before angling in a new direction, Aiden recognized the pattern. His partner was piecing together a scent map, rebuilding it from broken fragments carried on the wind. Training had taught Rocco to work even when the signal came in jagged, split apart by shifting currents. In a shallow basin, where the wind churned and twisted back on itself, Rocco stopped entirely, turning in a slow circle as if seeking a stable point. Aiden crouched, laying a gloved hand on the shepherd's shoulder, feeling the quick but even rhythm of his breath. Full concentration, no falter. Steady, just like we always do, Aiden murmured. Rocco seemed to understand. He drew in a long breath, then angled off on a diagonal to the right into a denser stand of trees where the wind softened and snow clung in thicker blankets. Here the air held just a thread more warmth, and with it a trace of scent set apart from the cold's monotone. They climbed a slick rise, Aiden gripping exposed roots to keep his footing, while Rocco bounded ahead with sure steps, pausing to check that Aiden was still behind. The ground grew more treacherous. Ice-sheathed rocks scattered underfoot, narrow fissures hidden beneath the snow. Any one of them a trap for the unwary. Still, Rocco didn't slow. He tracked the scent with unwavering focus, pausing only to recheck the air before moving deeper into the woods. Aiden felt his own heartbeat syncing with the dog's steady rhythm. In his mind, Lena's voice played over and over. "My mom's gone. Please save my brothers and sisters." It wasn't just a plea anymore. It was an order written into his bones, one he and Rocco would follow until there was nothing left to give. A moment later, Rocco lowered his head and picked up Speedtail lifted high, a clear sign the scent had grown stronger. Aiden immediately pushed harder, ignoring the snow swallowing his legs nearly to the knee. Together they cut through white-draped underbrush branches, bowed low under the weight of ice, until they reached an area where the snow's surface was lightly disturbed. Signs of recent movement. Aiden dropped to one knee. The snow here was uneven, with small round impressions shaped like a child's hand or knee. Nearby, caught on a low pine branch, were a few strands of red and blue wool. His heartbeat quickened. Threads from a child's clothing. He looked up to find Rocco frozen in place, nose aimed at the darkness between two massive trunks. Even without seeing more, Aiden knew the way forward was set. He keyed his radio, his voice urgent but steady. "This is Aiden. Direction of probable target movement confirmed. Advancing deeper. Medical team on standby." From the distance, the wind rose again, carrying a wall of white that threatened to erase the fragile clues they'd just found. But Rocco pressed on each step firm, as if the path was already etched in his memory, and Aiden, without a flicker of hesitation, followed his partner into the shadows, into a place where what lay ahead could decide the fate of the entire rescue. The wind poured harder off the slope, shoving at Aiden's chest like an unseen hand. Snow fell heavier still, clinging to his hood shoulders, and the coiled rescue rope across his chest until each step felt twice its weight. Ahead, Rocco kept steady, the reflective straps of his harness flickering in the beam of the headlamp, the tether between them vibrating with each gust. Minutes later, they reached a treacherous choke point, a deep, narrow gorge rimmed with rock glazed in blue ice. At the bottom, frost drifted in a faint mist that hid the true depth. A natural ice bridge crossed it barely wide enough for one person, the surface polished glass smooth by wind and frozen spray. One mistake here meant a drop into a freezing void. Aiden glanced back. Jonas, the youngest on the team, stood ready behind him, cheeks flushed from cold eyes set with determination. "One at a time," Aiden ordered. "Keep the safety line taut and clipped. Rocco leads." Rocco went first, claws biting into the ice, moving in short, deliberate steps. His harness caught the light glinting against the snow haze. Aiden followed close, keeping the rope to Rocco taut both as a guide and an anchor. Halfway across, Jonas stepped onto the bridge. A sudden gust ripped across the gorge, skimming away a thin layer of snow and stealing his footing. He pitched sideways toward the abyss, a choked cry lost in the wind. In an instant, Rocco wheeled around, claws digging deep, throwing his weight into the safety line, looped through Aiden. The sudden pull jolted Aiden into motion. He hauled in the opposite direction, forcing the rope tight. Jonas stopped just short of the edge. "Hold!" Aiden's shouted voice cutting through the roar. Step by careful step, he reeled Jonas back until both boots planted firm on the ice. On the far side, Jonas was still catching his breath. He glanced at Rocco. The shepherd had already turned forward again, tail swaying lightly, as if to reassure him. "If it weren't for Rocco..." Jonas began, voice breaking. Aiden's hand landed on his shoulder, steady and warm, despite the cold. "In this team, we hold each other up. Today, Rocco gave you a lesson in survival." Without another word, they pressed on. The gorge was behind them now, but the hum of the wind in the safety line still echoed in Aiden's ears. He cast a look at Rocco, ears forward, steps unwavering against the snow. This was more than a working dog. This was a partner, a rescuer in his own right. Ahead, the storm opened into another pale, shifting space, and somewhere in that frozen emptiness might be a voice waiting to be heard. The wind eased slightly, but the snow kept falling thick and heavy, layering over the ground in deep, soft mounds. After the gorge, they descended a gradual slope toward a lower section of forest. The pines here grew thick, their laden branches hanging like curtains against the wind. Rocco slowed. He drew in a few long breaths, then veered right toward a narrow gap between tree trunks. Aiden followed, marking each landmark in his mind. The way back would be as critical as finding their goal. Only a few dozen paces on a shadowed shape emerged through the white. A small, crooked wooden cabin, its roof sagging to one side, half buried to the window frame in snow. The boards were faded and cracked from frost, giving it the look of something abandoned long ago. But Rocco went straight to it without hesitation. Up close, Aiden saw the door blocked by packed snow and broken boards. He pulled the small shovel from his pack, clearing the drift in sharp, quick strokes until the frame showed through. Each scoop sent plumes of snow into the air, dusting his gloves and mask. Rocco stood at the threshold, head tilted, ears sharp. Suddenly he gave a short, low rumble. Not a warning, but a signal of discovery. Aiden froze, listening. At first it was only wind slipping through the warped boards. Then, under the storm's hush, he caught it. A faint breath mixed with a weak, muffled moan. So slight he might have mistaken it for timber creaking in the cold. "Is someone in there?" Aiden called, voice low and careful, so as not to startle whoever was inside. From beyond the weathered wood came a halting reply, thin but unmistakable. "Help, please." Aiden's whole body tightened like a drawn bow. He signaled Rocco to stay alert, then dug faster, his shovel biting into the packed snow until the warped wooden door gave way, just enough for him to lean inside. Darkness filled the small cabin, broken only by a sliver of light seeping through a crack in the roof. The air was thick with the damp scent of rot, mixed with the stale trace of old smoke, and the faint, shallow breath of a human being. In the far corner, curled up against the wall, lay a small figure in a tattered coat, hair matted with snow, their thin frame trembling in shivers. Aiden knelt, reaching out with his gloved hand, speaking in a slow, steady tone. "I'm rescue. I'm taking you out. Hold on to my hand." The child, a boy it seemed, lifted his head weakly. His eyes clouded from cold and exhaustion, yet faintly lit with hope. He made the effort to reach forward, and Aiden clasped his hand firmly, pulling him close before wrapping him in a thermal rescue blanket. Rocco slipped inside, nose sweeping low across the warped floor, checking the shadows. He stopped at a collapsed pile of timber in the far left corner, gave one sharp bark, then looked at Aiden. The message was clear. There was more to check. "We'll come back, Rocco. First we get him safe," Aiden said, scooping the boy up and carrying him outside. The cold slapped their faces the moment they stepped out, but compared to the stifling air inside, it was almost bracing. Aiden keyed his radio. "Found one survivor. Need mobile medical to my coordinates. Possible additional victims inside. Will re-enter to confirm." Maya's voice came back tight with urgency. "Copy. Keep contact. Priority is keeping them alive." Aiden laid the boy on an insulated mat, letting Rocco lie beside him for warmth. The shepherd's gaze never left the cabin's dark slit of a doorway, as if he knew the story inside wasn't finished. Above, the wind had shifted, pushing thicker clouds over the tree line. Aiden glanced once more at the shadowed opening, a knot of certainty tightening in his gut. Whatever lay behind that wall of snow might decide the fate of the rescue. The sky was turning to a dense leaden gray, signaling the storm's return. But Aiden's focus locked on the cabin. He slipped a hand warmer into the rescued boy's coat pocket, then turned back to Rocco, tightening the line on his harness. "Show me." Inside, the air was heavy with cold and rot, each breath blooming in thick white plumes. Rocco moved straight to the collapsed timber in the corner, ducking through a narrow gap just wide enough for his muscled frame. Aiden knelt, followed him in the beam from his headlamp, sweeping over the damp floor until it caught on two small shapes huddled together. A boy of about 7 or 8 clutched a smaller child, maybe 5, both wrapped in a single soaked blanket. Their hair was plastered to their heads, lips pale with cold. "Eli. Noah," Aiden murmured, reading the names from a medical tag tied around one child's neck, a detail someone must have placed there before they were trapped. Rocco eased closer, settling beside them. His warmth reached the older boy, who stirred his glazed eyes, finding the shepherd's steady gaze. By instinct, the boy tightened his hold on his brother, as if to shield him to the very last moment. Aiden's assessment was quick, but grim. Both children's core temperatures were dangerously low, their breathing shallow and slow fingers stiffened by frost. Their awareness flickered, their responses to light and sound delayed. From his pack, he pulled 2 thermal blankets, wrapping each child before tucking chemical warmers between their clothes and the blankets. When his hand brushed Noah's tiny fingers, their fragility jolted through him. A silent order to get them out now. "Hold on. We're going home," he said softly, as much to himself as to them. Rocco stayed close, head lowered, nose brushing the blankets, his warm breath settling over the children's cheeks like a silent vow. Aiden radioed again. "Cole here. 2 more child victims found. Core temps critically low, semi-conscious. Request immediate medical at my location. Moving to extraction point." Maya's voice, urgent but clear, came back. "Copy. Medical team en route. Maintain constant updates." Aiden lifted Noah against his chest, holding him tight for warmth and shielding him from the wind. Eli was swaddled securely, a rescue line fastened to Rocco's harness so the shepherd could guide and stabilize him across the terrain. They stepped back into the storm. The wind knifed against their faces, trying to steal what little warmth remained. But Aiden felt none of it. The weight of 2 fragile lives and the unwavering presence of Rocco at his side filled every part of him. Through the white forest, the crunch of boots in deep snow joined the rhythm of Rocco's breath and the ceaseless hiss of the wind, urging them onward. Ahead through the swirling haze, a flash of red blinked. A beacon cutting through the storm. The red strobe of the medical team flared like a lighthouse in the frozen sea. Aiden hugged Noah tighter, his other hand gripping Rocco's line as the shepherd moved Eli steadily forward. Each step was a fight against the wind, every icy draft clawing through seams to drain away heat. And still, they pushed toward the light. They were only a few hundred meters from the rendezvous when a sudden gust roared down from the mountainside. The blizzard swept in faster than predicted, flinging great swirls of white that swallowed the world in a breath. Aiden scanned frantically for a temporary shelter, anything to shield the children before they crossed the last exposed stretch. Through the curtain of snow he spotted another shack smaller than the last, its timber frame bare, in places part of the roof caved in. It leaned precariously, but it would block the wind for a few precious minutes. He hustled the group inside, intending to wait for the worst of the gusts to pass. But as they crossed the threshold, a high, straining creak shuddered through the rafters. The next gust slammed the wooden door back against the wall with a bang, and the shack shook on its frame. Aiden had just lifted his eyes when he saw it. A rotting roof beam, thick as his forearm, breaking loose and dropping straight toward Eli and Noah. It happened in less than a heartbeat. Rocco, already standing guard near the boys, moved like lightning. He lunged forward, his whole body stretching in a single leap, shoulders slamming into Eli to shove him clear, while his hindquarters swung toward Noah, sweeping the younger boy out of the beam's path. The timber hit the floorboards with a heavy crack, splintering in a spray of dust and debris. Without that strike, it would have come down directly on their heads. Eli staggered, nearly falling, but Aiden caught him. Noah rolled a few times across a dust-cloaked rug, breathing hard with shock. Both were shaken, coated in snow and grit, but unhurt. Aiden dropped to check Rocco. The shepherd was already on his feet, the fur along his left shoulder matted with wood splinters. His eyes still blazed, breath coming fast with the surge of adrenaline, tail swaying once as if to say, "They're all right." "Good boy, Rocco." Aiden murmured, his voice low with relief. He tucked fresh hand warmers into the children's coats and pulled their thermal blankets tight again. They couldn't linger. Time was burning away. The storm outside howled, but after what had just happened, Aiden felt the weight of every second more keenly. He signaled for Rocco to take point, and they pushed back out through the wind-torn doorway into the deep white. The snow lashed their faces like needles. Yet in Aiden's chest, the image of Rocco throwing himself between the children and the falling beam burned, a moment both fierce and beautiful, born not only of training, but of an unshakable instinct to protect. Ahead, the red flash of the rescue team still blinked, patient and steady. This time, Aiden knew they would reach it, with every child alive. The air inside the shack still smelled of rot and dust, but Aiden, Rocco, and the three children had steadied their breathing. Outside, the wind's pitch rose flurries spilling in through gaps in the walls. Their window for shelter was shrinking. The storm was closing in stronger by the minute. Aiden spread the insulated mat on the floor, seating Eli and Noah close together with Lena beside them to hold them tight. From his pack, he pulled 3 new reflective thermal blankets, wrapping each child from head to toe. Thin though they were, the blankets trapped heat and reflected the lamp's beam into a warm, golden glow amid the cold white world. "Stay close. Breathe steady," Aiden instructed, firm but gentle. He checked each in turn, feeling for a pulse at the wrist, pressing his palm to the nape of the neck for warmth. Noah still trembled, but his lips had flushed from blue to pink. Eli, exhausted, kept his eyes open. Lena gripped her brothers tighter, her gaze steadier now. Rocco stood beside them, his solid frame shielding the draft through the doorway. Frost clung to his black and tan coat, but his eyes were sharp, tracking every movement. Each time Aiden bent to check a child, Rocco leaned in, sniffing lightly, as if to confirm for himself they were all right. Aiden keyed his radio. "Cole reporting. 3 miners stable for now, core temps rising. Storm advancing. Need to move before visibility is gone." Maya's voice, jagged with static, came back. "Medical team approaching from the south. ETA 5 minutes. Hold position and be ready to move on signal." 5 minutes. In this storm, it could feel like an hour. Outside, the wind's hiss shifted to a deep, throaty roar, snow hammering the shack's walls like fistfuls of ice. Any change in wind direction could bury the exit in moments. Aiden used the time to fasten safety lines around each child's waist, connecting them to the main lead. The lead's front end clipped to Rocco's harness. He would break trail. Every one of the shepherd's steps in the whiteout would be a fixed point for the rest to follow. He crouched to touch Lena's cheek. "When we go out, hold your brothers tight. Stay right behind Rocco. I'll be right behind you." Lena nodded, her eyes still rimmed with red, but brightened by warmth and the big dog's presence. Eli and Noah tucked deeper into their blankets, looking up at Aiden and Rocco, as if anchoring themselves to them before they faced the storm. A sharp beep chirped from the radio. The signal. Maya's voice was clearer now. "Medical team 10 meters out. Move now." Aiden cinched his pack straps, pulled down his visor, and patted Rocco's shoulder. "Let's go, partner." Rocco stepped forward at once, strong legs punching into the snow, carving a trail for the tethered line behind him. The door banged open under the wind's shove, a wall of icy air bursting and flinging crystals against their faces. Aiden kept one hand locked on Rocco's line and the other wrapped around Eli, while Lena clutched Noah to her chest. Together they plunged into the white each step, carrying them toward the flicker of the rescue beacon, knowing that in a storm like this, every heartbeat counted. Above them, the clouds had swallowed the last light of day. Ahead, the red strobe still pulsed a promise that at the end of this gauntlet, warmth and safety were waiting. The wind's fury slammed into their faces, shoving the group off course just enough to force Aiden to reset his stance. Ahead, the rescue team's red beacon still blinked like a lone star in the whiteout. But as he and Rocco led them past a strip of low trees, a dry crack and a faint tremor underfoot made every nerve in his body tighten. "Stay close," he shouted, though the gale tore most of the sound away. A deep whump like thunder rolling inside the mountain broke over them from above. In seconds, a wall of snow came roaring down, dragging rock and shattered branches with it. The main path vanished beneath a towering barricade of packed snow shoulder high and solid as ice. Aiden pulled them behind a low rise just in time for the last wave to sweep past. When the roar faded, he took in the obstacle, too dense to breach quickly. And time was something they no longer had. A glance at the children told him what he already feared. Lena's arms locked tighter around her brothers, but Eli's and Noah's breathing was shallower, their shivers harder to control. The thin blankets could only hold off the cold for so long. Rocco, poised at the edge of the rise, turned his head toward the northeast muzzle, lifting to catch a current of air. Aiden trusted that instinct without hesitation. "Right turn," he called into the radio. "Main path blocked. Taking alternate route." 2 boys' core temps falling fast. Maya's reply came sharp and urgent through the static. "Copy. Redirecting to meet you east side. Move fast." They skirted along the slope, Rocco feeling out every step before placing his weight. The snow here was thinner than at the slide, but crosswinds whipped it into stinging grit that clung to brows and lashes in a thin glaze of ice. Aiden checked the children's necks for warmth. The chill under his glove told him the margin was down to minutes. His hand tightened on Lena's shoulder, a silent transfer of resolve. Rocco stopped now, and then glancing back to confirm the gap before breaking trail again. His paw prints stamped a clear path, and when the wind rose, he braced crosswise, blocking the gust from hitting the children directly. After long grinding minutes, the dark mass of a thick pine appeared ahead, its bulk breaking some of the wind. Aiden called a brief halt there, tucking the blankets tighter, pressing fresh heat packs against small spines and chests. "We're close," he told them low and steady. Lena's reddened eyes met his steady now with understanding. Every step Rocco took was a step toward safety. The radio rasped, then Maya's voice cut through. 50 meters ahead and left. You'll see a green beacon. We're there." Aiden nodded reflexively, though she couldn't see it. He signaled Rocco forward. The shepherd surged ahead, cutting across a shallow drift toward a faint green blink just visible through the storm. The wind still screamed, but that light pulled them on like a lifeline over the avalanche's white barricade. If they kept pace, they could hand the children over before their bodies reached the point of no return. The northern gusts came harder now, biting into Aiden's skin, forcing him to squint to keep the beacon in view. But the direct line was gone, claimed by the slide. Only one way remained, a narrow mid-slope ledge just wide enough for man and dog to move shoulder to shoulder, a rock wall to the left and to the right, a void swallowed in clouded snow. Aiden bent toward Lena, his tone unwavering. "We're crossing the ledge. Hold your brothers tight, stay behind me. Rocco will lead." She nodded, clutching Eli and Noah. Her legs trembled, but her eyes stayed locked forward. Rocco moved first, his gait solid and sure claws biting into the crust to leave deep, defined tracks. Aiden kept one hand on the shepherd's lead, his gaze sweeping for hidden dangers. Here the wind met from both sides, scouring the surface to slick ice. One slip would mean the drop. At a sharp bend, Rocco froze ears, spearing forward, nose to the ground. A low growl pulsed in his throat, their warning. Aiden held up a hand to halt Lena, then probed the surface with his staff. The tip punched through with barely any force, revealing a thin sheet of ice over air. "Good work, Rocco," he murmured, pulling a spare rope from his pack. He clipped one end to the shepherd's harness, the other around a scraggly pine trunk rooted tight into the slope. Pressing himself against the rock wall, Aiden edged along, planting his staff for balance. Rocco mirrored him, shifting his weight to keep from breaking the crust. Once they were across, Aiden signaled Lena. "Follow our tracks," eyes on Rocco's back. She drew a breath and stepped out, her brothers locked in her arms. Step for step, she matched the prints until her boots reached solid ground. The instant they cleared the danger, a sudden gust shattered the weakened ice. The snow slab broke away in a dull crack and dropped into the mist below its echoes, rumbling in the valley. A stark reminder how close they had been to vanishing with it. Ahead, the ledge still hugged the rock face, but the footing held. Rocco took point again, glancing back between turns, his eyes a steady promise. Just minutes now. On the far side of the ridge, the blue glow of the medical team's lights sharpened from a faint shimmer into the silhouettes of people waving. Through the wind, Aiden could hear the hoarse calls from a loudspeaker, the sound carrying the promise of help drawing near. His pulse eased, not from relief, but from the steadying surge of trust returning to his chest. The path was still narrow, yet every step fell into the prints Rocco had left, and that was enough to tell him they would make it out. Together. The blue light flickered closer than ever, dancing in the cold wind like a lifeline pulling them towards safety. The narrow track widened, giving way to a slope that spilled down into the valley, where red-suited rescuers waited in place. Aiden glanced back. Lena held Eli and Noah close, following the trail Rocco had carved. The wind still cut across the ridge, weaker now, but no less dangerous. One shift in weather or terrain, and everything could turn in an instant. It happened fast. A sudden gust tore the silver blanket from Noah's shoulders, snatching away the thin shield that kept his small body from losing heat too quickly. Aiden's heart lurched. But before he could move, Rocco was already there. In one fluid leap, the seasoned rescue dog caught the blanket's edge in his jaws, tugged it back from the air's grasp, and returned it intact. He stood steady as Aiden wrapped it around Noah again. "Good boy." Aiden breathed, tightening the knot, so the wind could not steal it twice. Rocco's breath smoked in the frigid air, his eyes lit with calm determination. The medical team was now only yards away. Heat from portable lamps bled into the wind, voices cutting through the snow. "Keep coming. Just a little more." They pushed on. Aiden's grip on Rocco's lead was warm now, not from the temperature, but from the unshakable assurance that this dog would never let anyone fall behind. As Lena passed, she whispered something to Rocco. He met her with a quiet, knowing gaze. Stepping off the ridge, Aiden finally let out a deep breath. They had crossed the most dangerous stretch of the journey, one where a single mistake could cost a life. In the instant that blanket nearly vanished, Rocco had again proven himself more than part of the rescue team. He was the tether between life and death. The medics were ready at the handover point, with warmth, medicine, and safety awaiting them. But for Aiden, crossing that invisible line meant the mission to save 3 fragile lives had entered its final stage, even if the storm still gripped the land. Mist and snow veiled the world, in silver hiding all but a few feet ahead. Flakes stung as they struck his skin, but there, in the haze, Aiden caught a flash of white-gold light on the horizon. At first it was just a spark lost in the swirl, then steadily it resolved into the familiar strobe of an ambulance's lights. They didn't stand still. They pulsed in steady rhythm, beckoning them closer. His heartbeat thudded like a drum line to match each step toward the fragile border between peril and safety. "Lena, look," he murmured. She raised her head, her snow-wet eyes brightening with a flicker of hope. Eli and Noah still clung to her, their breaths thin, but he could feel their trembling ease, as if the light ahead had reached into them. Rocco led on, ears sharp, his solid frame cutting a steady path through the drifts. On slick patches he slowed, waiting for the others to close the gap, gaze locked on the beacon ahead. Another surge of wind blurred the lights for a moment. Aiden bent to shield the children pushing forward. He knew that in this cold, even minutes lost could tip Eli and Noah into irreversible hypothermia. The deep hum of an engine rumbled faintly through the snow, steady and sure. His radio crackled. Maya's voice breaking through, "We see you, keep straight." The word struck like a shot of strength. He drove his steps harder, legs sinking half a boot into the snow, Rocco matching his urgency, weaving between drifts to close the distance. Less than 100 meters now. The ambulance's lights were near enough to paint each swirling flake in gold. Heat from outdoor lamps licked the wind, mixing with the shouts of rescuers waving them in. Aiden's heartbeat merged with Rocco's stride. Fast, fierce, resolute. Each breath rose in white ribbons behind them, the faint trail of a journey balanced on the edge of survival. And when his boot met the cleared snow before the ambulance, Aiden knew the line between life and death had narrowed to just a few steps. Yet to him, every one of those steps was proof that in the heart of the storm, a light in the mist was never just a guide. It was a promise to bring them all home. The sound of the ambulance door swinging open cut through the howling wind like an urgent summons. Brilliant white light spilled from inside, blending with a rush of warmth from the heater melting away the edge of the frozen air in front of them. 2 paramedics stepped down at once, each swiftly taking a child from Aiden and Lena's arms. Quickly, their body temperature is dropping. The doctor's voice urged, layered over the beeping of monitors springing to life. Eli was laid gently on a long bench lined with thick blankets. One medic wrapped him in a silver thermal sheet, while the other slipped a small oxygen tube beneath his nose. Noah was brought alongside expert hands, checking each breath, each flicker of response. Chemical heat packs were activated and pressed to his chest and back to coax his blood to flow more freely. Lena remained at the open door, her hands trembling from the cold, her eyes fixed on Rocco. Standing close, his breath puffing in steady clouds against the frigid air. When a medic reached to guide her gently inside, she bent quickly, wrapping her arms tightly around Rocco's neck, her voice breaking. "I'll go, but Rocco needs to be near." Standing close, Aiden understood at once. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Rocco's coming. He brought us here, and he'll stay until everyone is safe." Only then did Lena step inside, her hand still gripping the strap on Rocco's harness, as if letting go might erase all they had just endured. Inside, the hum of the heater, the clipped calls of medical orders, and the muffled rush of wind outside wove into a rhythm both urgent and warm. Gradually, a healthy flush returned to Eli's and Noah's cheeks as their core temperatures rose. The doctor glanced at Aiden and gave a small nod, wordless confirmation that the children's chances had risen sharply. Rocco lay beside Lena, his warm body a shield between her and the cold beyond the door. Every time she looked up, he met her with the same calm, steady gaze he had held all through the perilous journey, a silent promise that he would not leave her side. Aiden leaned lightly against the doorframe, feeling the heat spill across his face, watching the three children. He knew this was more than a medical handover. This was the true threshold, the moment they had wrestled three fragile lives back from the storm. The image of Lena's small hand still clenched around Rocco's lead fixed itself deep in his mind, a testament to the bond between people and dogs, the quiet strength that had carried them through. The ambulance pulled away, leaving deep tire tracks in the snow. Red and white lights blinked and then vanished into the mist, swallowed by the wind sweeping across the valley. Aiden stood still, watching until the last glimmer faded, locking the moment into memory. He turned to find Rocco seated beside him, his black and tan coat dusted with snowflakes, breath steady and even. The dog showed no sign of fatigue, no need for comfort, just sat there with a serene gaze fixed on the road the ambulance had taken. In that look, Aiden read certainty, a strange calm after all the chaos they had faced. He lowered himself to sit beside Rocco, resting a hand lightly against his warm back. The feel of that coat pulled him through the whole journey again. From the moment the urgent call had come in to stepping into the storm, following those small footprints to finding Lena and hearing her quiet, heart-wrenching plea. "My mother is gone. Please save my siblings." Every memory played back like a slow film with Rocco leading each frame. The wind still lashed at them, but Aiden didn't rush to return. He wanted these minutes with the companion who had walked beside him to the very edge of danger. Rocco tilted his head slightly as if sensing Aiden's thoughts, before turning his gaze back toward the road where those three lives had been delivered to safety. The silence between them was no emptiness. It was understanding. In that quiet, Aiden knew Rocco's mission was complete. Without need for praise, without medals. His eyes stayed on the ambulance's path long after it was gone, as if to make certain the rescue was truly finished. A member of the rescue team approached, laying a hand on Aiden's shoulder. "Mission accomplished. All thanks to you two." Aiden smiled faintly, but his eyes dropped to Rocco. "He's the hero," he said softly. Rocco didn't respond, just closed his eyes for a moment as the wind brushed the last snowflakes from his fur. When he opened them again, they were as bright as they had been that morning. A look ready for the next journey, whenever it might come. And so, in the wide white stillness, man and dog sat together silent, but knowing that some victories are never spoken, only kept alive in the heart. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through thinning clouds, catching on the fresh snow that had fallen overnight, brightening Cedar Hollow far more than the day before. In the rescue station's lounge, Aiden was checking over gear that had been dried by the fire when the desk phone rang. Maya's voice came through lively, yet still carrying her familiar professional edge. "Good news, Aiden. All three sisters are stable. The doctors say just a few more days of observation." Aiden paused for a beat, then smiled, a rare unguarded expression of relief. He glanced over at Rocco curled on the rug by the hearth, ears pricking at the change in his tone. "Did you hear that, Rocco? They're out of danger now," Aiden said, voice low but warm. As if he understood perfectly, Rocco rose, padded over, and rested his head against Aiden's leg. In that moment, Aiden was reminded that though the dog never spoke, he always had a way of making people feel joy and peace in the clearest, truest way. News of the rescue spread quickly through the town. Within hours, people began arriving at the gates of the rescue station, carrying bags of pastries, boxes of hot food, and hastily written letters. An elderly woman brought a loaf of bread fresh from the oven, her hands still warm. "I heard what you and this dog have done," she said softly. "Cedar Hollow is lucky to have you." The children of the town came running, clutching handmade cards with drawings of a large dog sheltering 3 small figures. One boy gifted Rocco a knitted blue scarf, awkwardly looping it around the dog's neck. "So you'll be warmer when you go outside?" he mumbled shyly. The members of the rescue team could not hide their pride. Everyone knew this mission was more than a victory. It was proof of the strength that comes from coordination and from the trust between humans and dogs. That afternoon, Aiden received another call from the hospital. Lena's voice came through weak but full of emotion. "Uncle Aiden, my brothers and I, thank you, and thank Rocco too. When I'm better, I want to come see you." Aiden glanced at Rocco and smiled. "We'll be waiting." Later that day, as the snow began to melt under the glow of sunset, Aiden led Rocco out into the front yard of the station. The dog stood still, gazing toward the town, his black and tan coat gleaming in the last light. In that moment, Aiden knew every step, every hardship they had endured in the storm had been worth it. For they had given 3 small lives a new chance and left the whole community with a renewed sense of hope. The hospital room door opened with a quiet creak. Warm air poured out, pushing back the lingering cold in the corridor. Aiden stepped in first, carrying the blue scarf that a townsman had sent, and Rocco padded in close behind the faint click of his nails on tile, enough to light up the 3 small faces on the bed. Lena's voice was clear, but still a little hoarse. She jumped down from her chair and wrapped her arms around his neck. Eli and Noah joined in quickly, forming a warm, tangled embrace in the middle of the white hospital room. Rocco stood calmly, tail swaying gently, deep brown eyes scanning each child as if to confirm once more that they were truly safe. His coat warmed beneath their small hands, his steady breath a familiar rhythm that had carried them through the worst of the storm. Aiden stood by the bed for a moment, saying nothing, letting the scene speak for itself. He set the scarf on the table, then pulled 3 hand-knitted hats from his coat pocket, blue, red, and yellow. Gifts from the people of Cedar Hollow. "These are from everyone back home," he told them. "They all wish you a quick recovery and a peaceful life." Noah looked up, eyes bright with childlike wonder. "Uncle Aiden, when I grow up, I want to save people like you and Rocco." Aiden knelt so he could meet the boy's gaze. "The most important thing is to keep a brave heart and to care for others. If you can do that, you're already a hero." They spent the rest of the morning sharing stories about Rocco, from his training days to other rescues he had been part of. Lena listened closely, her hand never leaving the warmth of his fur, as if afraid that letting go would make the safety of this moment fade away. Outside the window, the first snow of winter began to fall again, soft and silent. Pale light filtered through the glass, touching Lena's golden hair, Eli and Noah's small shoulders, and Rocco's dark coat. In that quiet frame, laughter mingled with the falling snow, creating a winter melody, warmer than any fire. Before leaving, Aiden bent down to look the 3 children in the eyes. "We've been through an unforgettable winter together. Promise me you'll live strong from now on, and reach out for help when you need it." 3 firm nods. Lena whispered. I promise. And I know Rocco will always be somewhere watching over us. When Aiden and Rocco stepped outside, snow still fell steadily, but it no longer carried the cold bite of the storm. It carried the feeling of a new beginning of life, of hope, and of promises kept safe in the heart. The story of Aiden Rocco and the 3 children of Cedar Hollow was more than a perilous rescue. It was living proof of the power of compassion and the unbreakable bond between people and German shepherds. In each step on the snow, Rocco had shown the finest qualities of his breed: intelligence, loyalty, and a keen instinct for even the faintest signals of life. From the moment he caught the scent carried by the freezing wind, to the instant he stood still to let 3 small pairs of arms hold him tight, every gesture had been that of a silent but irreplaceable companion. Aiden, with his experience and the heart of a man who had risked himself for others, found in Rocco not just a partner, but a part of his family. This story reminds us that loving animals is not only about caring for them, but also about honoring the values they bring us. Their steady presence, their comfort in difficult times, and sometimes their role as a bridge that leads us back to believing in life again. On that cold winter day, as snow fell gently outside the hospital window, the image of Rocco beside the children became a symbol of life and hope. And perhaps in every heart, there will always be a Rocco, a loyal friend always ready to walk with us through the storms of life.